Welcome to the lecture on Module 3 Virus, Worms and Other Malwares. In this chapter, we are going to study about various kinds of malwares including worms, viruses, trojan and bots. We identify several features of malware and their many vectors of propagation. Some malwares are activated by human intervention, that is, the click of the infected email attachment or visit to the website hosting malicious code. On the other hand, internet scanning worms spread automatically without human intervention. Recently, another type of malware called bots have received much press. An army of compromised computers or bots under the control of a single master is referred to as botnet. Botnets have been used for sending spam mail, launching distributed denial of service attack, and in identifying theft. Introduction. Of all malware types, worms and viruses have probably received the maximum attention. They both refer to malware that replicate themselves. A virus launches itself onto an executable file or program, while a worm is typically a standalone program. A virus infects a file and uses it as a host from which to infect other files, while a worm spread from one computer to another. The rate of spread of virus in general is relatively slow. For example, the rate of spread of boot sector virus was limited by the rate at which boot floppies are exchanged. This boot sector virus is a kind of malware that reside in the boot sector of a floppy disk. This is usually the first sector on the disk and contain code for bootstrapping. Since boot floppies were often exchanged and copied by the people, boot virus spread within user communities. Worms uses the network to propagate. Many of the recent worms propagates at extraordinary speed. Some of them are activated and propagated without human intervention. They may spread halfway around the globe before system administrator could be allowed to take remedial action. A Trojan horse is a program with a malicious component that looks like a useful piece of software. Unlike virus or worms, trojans do not replicate. A trojan is typically activated by action on the part of the victim. Trojan can enter a system in several ways: through email attachments, through file sharing software from your website, or through cellular downloads. For example, a user may download and while the calculator may function as expected, it may also perform a more insidious task such as reading a file on the disk and setting up a network connection to a hacker over which it communicates that file. Next, we'll see about various characteristics of virus. When a virus infected program is run, the virus code is executed first. One of the first tasks of virus code is to seek other programs not yet infected and then passes on the infection to other or more of them. A truly malicious virus may then perform actions such as deleting certain files. All the virus code need not be located at the start of the infected file. In some cases, virus code is both prepended and appended to the host file. Virus code could be split into several segments and interspersed throughout the infected file using the jump statements at the end of each virus segment. In most of these cases, the size of the infected program is larger than that of the original host program. This helps antivirus software to detect infected code. To avoid detection, some viruses modify the file service interrupt handler that returns attribute of files. By doing so, the server handler may be programmed to return the uninfected length of the file. Another technique is to use is compression so that the length of the infected file remains the same as the length of the original version. The virus writer include a compression routine in the virus code. To infect other files, the virus first compress the file and then prepend that virus code to the compressed file. The infected file must be uncompressed just prior to the execution. One of the characteristic features of many viruses is the set of system calls they make. System calls are used by application programs to request services of the operating system. They are made to read or write files, establish TCP connection, etc. Some viruses make calls to copy their own code to other file, create or modify entries in the Windows registry, or search for emails. Next we'll see about the worm characteristics. First we will see about classes and features. Worms are most commonly classified based on their vector of propagation. The main category include internet scanning worms, email worms, peer-to-peer worms, web worms, and mobile worms. Now we will see what are the characteristics of worm. The first characteristic is enhanced targeting. The most important attribute of a worm is that it spread its infection to other computer. But how does a worm know who to target next? Many target selection strategies have been proposed and implemented. Worms that spread through email, for example, have an easy way to figure out their targets. All they need to do is look into the victim's mailbox or email address book to find a set of targets. A mobile worm obtained phone numbers of the potential victims from the phone book in the cellular phone hosting the worm. Some web worms uses search engines to harvest URLs of potentially vulnerable targets. Internet scanning worms, on the other hand, scan the IP address space for the vulnerable machines. The most straightforward approach is random scanning, choosing IP address at random. This was adapted by CodeRed version 1. CodeRed version 2 adopted localized scanning. Over 80% of the time, it attempted to connect to victims with whom it shares the network address. This strategy was more successful since hosts in the same network are likely to be closer and be running the same software. The next feature is enhanced speed. To enhance the infection rate, some worms are designed to span multiple threads. Each thread is responsible for setting up connection to different subset of hosts, thus increasing the rate at which infection is spread. Some worms reduces infection latency by targeting a buffer overflow vulnerability on the application that employs UDP rather than TCP. As you will be knowing, TCP connection establishment involves a three-way handshake and it is time consuming. In contrast, if you go for UDP, it is connectionless. This sharply reduces infection latency. A steep increase in the number of infected machines at the very outset of a worm epidemic has a multiplicative effect on spreading rate. For this purpose, the attacker could create one or more hit lists carrying addresses of several thousand vulnerable machines. The first worm to be let loose could carry one such list. As a worm infects each new machine, it splits its list between itself and the machine it has to be infected. The most of the machines on the hit list are vulnerable. The worm spread rapidly during the initial stage of epidemic. Therefore, the infected machines could spread the infection using random scanning or some other spreading method. The next feature is enhanced capabilities. Most worms have unique and distinct signatures. It is a pattern of bits, usually assembly language code, which appears in all instances of the worm. Worms and virus signatures are the key to detect them. However, there are again some other techniques to detect viruses and worms. One such technique is the use of encryption for distinguishing worm code. Different instances of the worm may use different keys for encryption. Thus, they might fail to match any existing worm signature. Such worms are said to be polymorphic. A polymorphic worm would have to be decrypted before being executed. This suggests that a decryption routine in the clear would have to be part of the worm code. Decryption themselves may be very simple, inclusive XOR operation or trivial shift based substitution can be used. However, detecting a worm on the assumption that the decryptor routine is invariant would not always succeed. While encryption is one way of distinguishing malware, another is the creation of several code versions that are superficially different from functionally different but functionally identical. Tricks to create multiple versions include use of dummy instruction, use of extraneous operands, changing the flow of control without distributing the existing knowledge. So, this particular figure shows the version of assembly code that look different but perform the same function. So here you can see the required assembly code is this one. This is the pseudocode. Assembly code version is this one, which is the direct execution of this particular code. But you can observe the assembly code version 2. Here the working is same as this one, but additional instructions are added. The second version has also a spurious branch instruction to confuse worm code detection software that relies on control flow analysis. Worms that has multiple such versions with or without relying on the encryption are referred as metamorphic worms. The next characteristic is enhanced destructive power. It is estimated that worms such as Code Red and Nimda causes billions of dollars in damage. How are these costs are estimated? Analysts estimate cost based on lost productivity, cleanup cost, system downtime, which affect business and revenues. Fast spreading viruses also cause severe network congestion problem, disrupting normal internet traffic and contributing to system downtime. Some worms contributed attack package to a DDoS attack or causes website defacement. The witty worm, which appeared in May 2004, however, was qualitatively different. It was the first worm to carry a destructive payload. That is, it deleted a random section of victim's hard disk, leading to a system crash. Next we will see about internet scanning worms. One characteristic of internet scanning worm is that they are self-activated. The ability to spread without human intervention distinguishes them from most type of emails and webworms. This category of worms is so called because they scan the internet looking for vulnerable machines. The vulnerability could be a buffer overflow problems in commonly used service provided by a particular version of an OS. The worm communicates with and delivers its malicious payload to the victim using standard transport protocols such as TCP and UDP. Once installed on the victim, it could easily locate files, steal secrets, or deface web pages. But above all, it seeks new victim to infect. So here we will go for some of the case studies. The first case study is about Code Red. One of the best example of internet scanning worm is the Code Red worm. It is started on June 18, 2001 when a buffer overflow vulnerability was discovered in the Microsoft IIS web server. A patch for this vulnerability was developed a few days later. It is estimated that there were several million IIS servers in active deployment. Even assuming that a large percentage of these were patched, that still left plenty of room for the spread of worms, which was unleashed on July 12, 2001. The worm itself was carried in HTTP request message targeted at IIS server. The first version of the worm used a random generator to generate new address of machine to infect. However, the same seed was used for random number generator in every instance of the worm. The next case study is about Slammer. The SQL Slammer was launched on 25 July 2003 and targeted a buffer overflow vulnerability on the Microsoft SQL Server 2000. The worm sent packet on UDP port 1434, that is a port the database software resolution service provider. It used simple random scanning to propagate. Slammer's payload was mere 384 byte in length, far smaller than the 4 kilobyte payload of Code Red. Also, UDP being a connectionless protocol, there is no overhead of connection establishment. The number of machines infected by Slammer doubles every 8.5 seconds compared to doubling once in 37 minutes in the case of Code Red. Slammer was not designed to erase files or install backdoors, etc., but it severely disturbed internet traffic. Among the many casualties were several switches and routers that crashed. Next, we'll see about worm propagation models. One of the most alarming aspects of some of the worms developed since 2001 is the speed at which they infect their victims. Modeling worm propagation is important for several reasons. It helps us obtain insight into the factors that governs its speed. It also helps in studying the efficiency of different schemas designed to retard the spread of worms. The first such model is simple epidemic model. The simple epidemic model used to study the spread of infectional diseases among humans is an appropriate point. The model assumes that there are only two types of entities in the population. Either an individual is susceptible, may be liable to be harmed, or he is infected. An infected individual can infect a susceptible person. Once infected, a person remains infected and does not recover in this model. Let n be the size of total population. Let I of t be the number of infected individual at a time t. The number of susceptible at a time t is then n minus I of t. Let beta be the initial infection rate, that is, each infected person attempt to pass an infection to beta susceptibles in one time unit. The following differential equation capture the number of infected persons at t, that is di is equal to beta of I of t into 1 minus I of t by n of dt, or beta into dt is equal to d of I of t divided by I of t by 1 minus I of t by n. In an infinite population, each infected person infects beta dt susceptibles in time interval dt. However, in a finite population of size n, the probability that the target of an infective is already infected is I of t by n. Such target do not add to the population of newly infected. The factor 1 minus I of t by n in the above equation ensure that only previously infected entities are added to the count of freshly infected in time interval dt. So together this both will yield this equation. So we can discuss this equation with respect to code red. A crucial observation is that the simple epidemic model is fairly accurate in determining the number of infected machines in the first 15 hours following the outbreak of code red 1. Thereafter, the observed data and the model diverge. There are several explanations for this. First, some administrators applied patches so that their system, whether infected or susceptible, ceased to be either after being patched. Also, the large amount of scan traffic caused congestion on the internet, caused a reduction in infection rate. The next model what we will discuss is Kermark and McKendrick model or KM model. This model more accurately models the spread of human infection diseases by considering three categories of people: those who are susceptible, let it be state yes; those who are infectional, state I; and those who are neither, that is the individual who are cured or those who have succumbed to the disease, that is represented by terminal T. So initially all individuals in the population are susceptible. It is possible to go from state yes to I but not vice versa. This diagram will show that it is possible to move from state yes susceptible to infected after receiving the infection. An infectional person may or may not be cured. If cured, however, he is never again vulnerable to the disease. So that is, after receiving the infection, once if it is cured, means installing the patches, after installing the patches he will move into a state 2. So the transition from state I to 2 corresponds to an infected machine being patched, this state. Also, such a machine is never again vulnerable to code red infection. The next model is more realistic. Here one way shows patches are installed before getting infected. The next part shows that after getting infected, patches are applied and machine will move to state P1. So here P1 and P2 are the state representing patched. So as before, let we derive the model as before. Let I of t be the number of infectional machines at time t, let n be the total number of machines, and let beta be the infection rate. Let s of t be the number of susceptibles, so the number of machines in the terminal state is n minus I of s of t, number of susceptibles, minus I of t, that is number of infectional. So the Km set of equation is ds by dt is equal to minus beta I of t into s of t by n, and d of n minus s of t minus I of t by dt is equal to lambda I into t. So this describes the rate at which the susceptible decreases due to the transmission to the infectional state, and the second equation captures the rate at which machine in the terminal state increases. Next we will see about topological worms. Topological worms are so called because machines vulnerable to such worms can be represented as a graph with the nodes representing vulnerable machines. An edge between machine A and machine B exists if A knows or stores the address of B and is capable of directly infecting B by sending it a malicious payload. The topology worms has a focused target. Their immediate target are their neighbors, who are in turn spread the infection to their neighbors and so on. Thus their rate of spreading is potentially faster than the internet scanning worms. So here we are going to study about two types of topological worms, that is email worms and peer-to-peer worms. First we will see what I mean by email worms. Email worms are among the most common types of malwares that has received a lot of attention. The email worms propagate through infected email. The victim receives emails that appear to have come from the trusted or familiar source. On the other occasion, the email recipient is lured by the attachment with a catchy caption. In either the case, the worm is activated when the user clicks on the attachment. A classic example of email worm is I love you worm, unleashed in 2000. It appeared in the victim's inbox sporting the catchy title I love you. The victim sees an innocent text file attached to the email. In reality, the file named loveletter.txt.vbs contain Visual Basic script. By clicking on this attachment, the embedded VB script executes, sending a copy of itself to every person in the victim's contact list. Many email worms exploit the fact that the document created by certain word processor embed software macros in them. The macro execute when the document is opened. For example, the Melissa was a macro worm that propagate by sending copy of itself to the first 50% in the victim's address book. One of the best email worm of most recent vintage is SoBig, which was let loose in 2003. It spread by communicating malicious email or copying itself to an open network share. There were several versions of SoBig. One version could update itself by downloading code from certain websites. The URL of these sites were contained in the file that itself was downloadable from geocities.com. Some of the malicious code received installed a keystroke logger and stole password from its victims. The next worm is peer-to-peer worms. A peer-to-peer network is a massively distributed system of computers where each peer or node plays the role of both client and server. Here, each peer can act as a client as well as servers. These are contradictory to the client-server model. They are used principally for sharing files which may contain songs, images, videos, etc. Each peer maintains within itself a shared folder of files that it is willing to share with others. Users do not download files from a central server but from their peers located across the globe. To see how peer-to-peer worms spread, it is important to understand how peer-to-peer network works. Most peer-to-peer networks uses overlay networks, which is logical network of peers. You may have heard about how torrent files are downloaded. It will make use of peer-to-peer model. Two peers are said to be neighbors at any given point of time if there is an active TCP connection between them. Now, just go through this diagram. This is an example for a peer-to-peer network. Here, you just consider a peer A. Now, peer A wishes to download a file, let it be ABC. So, first it will create a query request message for ABC, which it will send it to all its neighbors. So, that query is represented by Q1. So, you can look over here, it will send query to its neighbors. Each neighbor that does not have that file in terms queries its neighbors and so on. So you can see this particular neighbor. So since he don't have that file, that peer will forward that query into its neighbor, that is represented by Q2. So many peers are those hard work independently trying to locate a peer who has ABC and willing to share it. If a peer has ABC, it returns a query hit. This message traces the path of query request in reverse. So a requesting node may receive multiple positive responses. For example, here A is searching for the file ABC. Now you just consider peer B and peer C has that file. Now peer C and B will give reply back to A by tracing the query path. Now A has received two responses. One is from C and one is from B. Now it can choose any one of them and directly contact them. That is, for example, in this case you just consider A will chooses B. Now node A sends its IP address to node B with a request that file ABC be downloaded to that IP address. Then the file will be downloaded either using FTP or HTTP. Here are some potential way in which peer-to-peer worms may spread. One of the simplest is form of a malicious peer to respond positively to any query. If the requester then chooses to download the file from that malicious peer, the latter sends an infected file whose name is changed to match that of the requested file. The infected file contains a worm which passes on its infection to the requester. Once infected, the requester mimics the behavior of the malicious peer, thus helping to propagate the infection. Alternatively, various popular files stored in the shared folder of the peer may also get infected. When any of them is downloaded, the infection spread to the shared folder of the requesting peer. The peers in a given peer-to-peer network run the same peer-to-peer protocol. There are usually few different implementation of their protocol, leading to little software diversity. An exploitable buffer overflow vulnerability in one popular implementation is a familiar starting point. This, coupled with the fact that peer maintain a list of neighbors, implies that worm has already target and does not need to perform random scanning as in the case of internet scamming. The first type of worm is said to be passive since it propagates only when they requested to download a file. The second type of worm is active since it propagates on its own without receiving request from its peer. One aspect of peer-to-peer worm is that they may result in no apparent traffic anomaly, so that intrusion detection system monitor network traffic is unlikely to receive an alert. Worms and case study. Web worms different from malware such as internet scanning worms in several ways. Many web worms are executable in browsers which run on diverse hardware OS platforms. Web worms are written in high-level language, making it easy to perform complex operation but difficult to execute low-level operation. On the other hand, many other worms are written in assembly language. One type of webworm is the XSS worm, so called since it exploits cross-site scripting vulnerability in the web server. The first step in creating an XSS worm is to inject attack code into the vulnerable web server. When a user accesses the infected website through his or her browser, the malicious code is downloaded on the browser. As in any XSS vulnerability, malicious code executes on the browser, given that a key function of the worm is to propagate. So we will see what you mean by this XSS worm case study. The XSS worm Swami was unleashed in October 2005, authored by Sami Kamkar. It is infected the social media site MySpace. Social networking sites typically allow the user to create and edit their profile, which are stored on the site and are accessible to other members of the social networking group. A user profile may contain information about him, including his hobbies, photographies, etc. A user profile also contains a list of user friends with hyperlink to their profiles. Sam added a bunch of carefully crafted JavaScript to his profile. When a visitor to Sammy's website, say V1, downloaded Sammy's profile onto his browser, the JavaScript in the Sammy's profile executed. This causes Sammy to be added as a friend in V1's profile and also to include the message, but most of all, Sammy is my hero. Within 20 hours of the first visit to Sammy's profile, Sammy had been added as a friend to more than millions user profiles. This rate of spread was even faster than that of CodeRed. The malicious script uploaded itself on V1's profile on MySpace server, thus infected it. This is done by an HTTP post request sent from browser to the server. However, that would cause the screen to freeze between sending the request and receiving the HTTP response from the server. To ensure that viewer and a normal screen experience, Sammy's JavaScript created an XML HTTP request object which was used to send the malicious JavaScript to the MySpace server. Unlike the regular HTTP request, the message from an XML HTTP request object is asynchronous and run in background. So this is all about this module, this chapter. Next we will see about what you mean by firewall in the next lecture.